So, why is vocabulary important? One of our core pillars is growing vocabularies in support of reading comprehension. And vocabulary knowledge is one of the strongest predictors of reading comprehension. If we don't know the words we're reading, we either stop comprehending or we stop reading. Deep vocabulary knowledge is developed by repeatedly exploring a word within rich contexts. Just two additional reviews almost doubles the likelihood that a student will learn a word. Also, having both direct and indirect instruction is important to fully support on tier two words, or those high frequency words we talked about earlier, that are used across content areas and by adults, and this should be prioritized. Providing rich context and multiple exposures for incidental learning are also beneficial for vocabulary acquisition. Having opportunities for exploration, repetition, intentional learning, as well as incidental learning, and multiple exposures of critical vocabulary words are key design choices for the vocabulary pillar. All of ReadWorks vocabulary words are hand selected with a focus on adding critical tier 2 and 3 words to students' vocabulary. So I'm going to, speaking of our pillars, again, we're really focusing on growing vocabularies. And in today's session, I'm going to walk you through different resources that we provide on the website that will enhance vocabulary. So I'm going to talk about the vocabulary widget, the interactive vocabulary activities. If you're already using ReadWorks passages, then you're probably familiar with these. And then I'm going to discuss the article a day vocabulary scope and sequence, where we have two important activities called Meaning Mapper and Word Detective. So let's jump right in. Here's the vocabulary widget. Like I said before, if you've been using us for a while and you've been using our passages and question sets, then you know that we'll have vocabulary words appear bolded in blue throughout passages. And students can click on those bolded blue words to hear the pronunciation. And if it's a noun, they'll see an image of that vocabulary word and they'll get the definition. We also include translations in Spanish and Mandarin. So all of our vocabulary words, like I mentioned before, are hand selected. We really focus on those critical tier 2 and 3 vocabulary words. And students get an opportunity to repeatedly explore these words in a rich context. Similar to the vocabulary widget, you've probably also seen the interactive vocabulary that we offer, right? So before students even read the passage, if you assign it to them digitally, students will have a chance to reflect on their understanding of the vocabulary words. And this is completely ungraded. And they move the slider as they reflect on their knowledge and understanding of that word. Then they read the passage, and then they can complete this activity where they can drag word parts down, they can hear the word said aloud. And then after they read the passage and they've been exposed to these new vocabulary words multiple times, they're going to have another opportunity to reflect on their knowledge of that word once again. Unlike the vocabulary widget, the interactive vocabulary activity will not pop up automatically. So in my demo later, I'm going to show you how to make sure that you're including this in your digital assignments. Now for the meaning mapper. Like the interactive vocabulary, you're going to have to select these activities when you assign them. They don't pop up automatically. This is available for grades 2 to 5. And when I say that, I mean if you have students reading on a 2nd to 5th grade level, regardless of the grade level that you're teaching, this is still very helpful for you to know about. And the meaning mapper is a graphic organizer. And so when a student logs in, they're going to see that meaning mapper activity first. Here's a breakdown, and I want to remind you that You will get a copy of these slides. You can click on the green resources button to take a look at the slides for today's webinar. So you can refer back to this slide if you wanted to try out the meaning mapper. Here's a sample pacing guide for you. So on the first day of the week, you introduce the purpose and the focus word, and throughout the week, students are able to add words and connections to the meaning mapper after reading the articles in the vocabulary article a day set. And then finally, at the end of the week, you can have students create a class meaning map. The word detective is another activity that is tied to the vocabulary article a day scope and sequence. This is a 15-minute routine. If you were present for yesterday's webinar where we talked about building background knowledge, you know that we have the article a day scope and sequence where we focus on topically connected texts, but we also offer the vocabulary article a day scope and sequence. And this is a 15-minute routine, so it's a little bit different than the 10-minute routine. And it's something that's designed for that last day of the article a day routine. The word detective activity also appears later on in that scope and sequence. I'll point that out to you during my demo. Word detective lets students explore word parts, so prefixes, base or root words, and suffixes to generate new and imaginary words. Knowledge of the meaning of word parts is a key contributor to students' vocabulary growth. As they come across familiar word parts in unfamiliar words, students will be able to use their knowledge to help figure out the meaning of new words. Knowledge of word parts also supports accurate spelling. So here are the steps for word detective. You start out, set the purpose, introduce that word part, define and model using the word part. Students get to play with the word part, and then you can have them share out. Now I'm going to pivot, and I'm looking away from the camera because I have a second screen here. But I want to show you what it looks like for the student when you've assigned these activities for them. And then I'll also log into my teacher account, and you can watch me locate these resources. So I'm going to start out with my student account. Okay. And I'm going to start with this passage here that I've assigned this student. First thing we see is the interactive vocabulary activity. Here are the words, the vocabulary words in the passage, and the students can slide along as they reflect on their understanding of these vocabulary words, right? Now they can read the story or listen to the story since I've included audio. And you'll see those vocabulary words bolded in blue. Now, after the student reads the passage, they can complete the vocabulary activity here. This is a word matcher. So the directions are on top. This icon means that students can click here to listen to the directions. And then they can drag the words, the synonyms to the correct matching word. Let's say they go to drag it to the wrong word. You'll see that it's moving away. See that? Yeah. And they can then move on to reflecting once again on these vocabulary words if their understanding has changed, right? You can also include comprehension questions. And we have some accessibility features on the top for students so they can expand for distraction-free view. When they're reading the passage, they can make the text bigger. So this is medium, large, and extra large. They can include paragraph numbers or use the guided reading strip. They can also use the split screen. So as they're working on those comprehension questions, they can go back in the text. I'm going to go back to the assignments because now I'm going to show you the meaning mapper. And this, what you'll see here is that it automatically pops up when they click on that article a day set. So they'll have the directions. And then they can go ahead, read an article first. They can complete their book of knowledge. And then they can go back to the articles and click on that meaning mapper. And they can come back to the meaning mapper throughout the week as they're reading the articles in the set. Here's another example of a vocabulary activity. This would be the word detective. So once again, students can read that passage, complete their book of knowledge, and go to the word detective activity. Here, they are focusing on the D ending. So I'm going to just show you how they can click here. They can type what that means. So I'm going to just say past tense. And then they can add a word that they've seen in the passage that they read. So if we were looking at Catherine Ferguson, right, here's an example. We have the word care highlighted here. They can now build a new word with that new ending. And they can come back to this throughout the week. I'm going to log into my teacher account so I can just take a moment to walk you through how to locate these resources on the website if you're not familiar. So head on over to the content page. Like I said before, you're probably already familiar with the passages. The passages have the vocabulary widgets and the interactive vocabulary activities, but you can go ahead, click on reading passage. You can filter out by grade level. And when you go to assign, make sure that you're selecting the vocabulary activity. So it's not going to always pop up automatically. You can also select audio to support below grade level readers, ELL learners, and you can go ahead and assign. Also, the comprehension questions, if you just want to focus on vocabulary, you could choose not to include comprehension questions. It's really up to you. I'm going to head back to the content page, and I want to show you the vocabulary article a day scope and sequence. So if you head over to scope and sequences, I'm sure if you've used article a day before, you're familiar with this view. But if you go to the drop-down menu, you can select vocabulary. And here we have grades 2 to 5. And the scope and sequence will start at September and end in June. Something else that you're going to notice is that at the start of the scope and sequence, you're going to see the meaning mapper activity. But as you get to the end, you'll see the word detective activity. And you can assign an entire month's worth of article a day sets just by clicking on the assign button from the scope and sequence page. You can select audio to, again, support below grade level readers and ELL students. The boost and challenge articles are another great way to differentiate. The boost articles are written at a grade level below. So here's a 3rd grade set. That just means these articles in the boost The boost articles are going to be written at a second grade level, and the challenge articles are written a grade above, so that's fourth grade. So you can assign these to the entire class. You can also choose to focus on groups if you want to make groups. You can turn on ELL and extra support features. That way students can read the directions, hear the directions in the language that they speak at home. And you can go ahead and create the assignment from there. Or you can click on a specific week. You can assign that week and make sure that you're selecting the vocabulary activity. So it doesn't come up automatically every time. So you're going to really want to make sure you don't miss that. All right. So just to kind of sum up, the content page is the best place to be to look for these resources. You can find the vocabulary article a day by clicking on scope and sequence and just selecting vocabulary. Or if you want to use the passages that have those interactive vocabularies, you can filter under content type, grade level, activity type, whatever it is that you need. All right. Thank you so much for joining us today.